$10,000 in savings? Most people make this mistake. So picture this. You've just checked your bank account, and for the first time in maybe your entire adult life, there's a real number sitting there. Not covering the bills money, not I'll figure it out next month money. We're talking about $10,000, an actual, genuine savings cushion. And instead of feeling good, instead of feeling that quiet relief you imagined you'd feel when you finally got here, you feel weirdly anxious. Like, now what? Like you've climbed to the top of this hill you've been staring at for years, and now that you're standing on it, you realize you have absolutely no idea what's on the other side. Maybe you start Googling what to do with $10,000, and you fall into this rabbit hole of advice. Put it in a high-yield savings account. No, wait, invest it in index funds. Actually, have you heard of I-bonds? What about real estate? Maybe you should pay off debt first. But wait, isn't all debt not created equal? And 2 hours later, you close your laptop feeling more confused than when you started. That's a weirdly specific scenario, I know, but I've heard some version of it so many times that it honestly feels like one of the most universal experiences in personal finance. This moment where you finally have money and then immediately feel paralyzed about what to do with it. My name is Ryan, and I spend probably an embarrassing amount of time thinking about money, not just the numbers side of it, but the psychology of it. Why some people can build wealth quietly and almost effortlessly, while others seem to run in place no matter how hard they work. Why smart, capable people make financial decisions that, from the outside, look almost self-sabotaging. I find that stuff genuinely fascinating, and a little bit haunting if I'm being honest. And what I've noticed over and over again is that when people hit that first major savings milestone, that $10,000 mark, they almost always make one of a small handful of very specific mistakes. Not because they're careless, not because they don't care about their financial future, but because nobody actually taught them what this moment is supposed to look like. Nobody explained what $10,000 in savings actually means, what it doesn't mean, and most importantly, what it's supposed to do for you from here. So that's what today is about, and I think by the end of this, you might look at that number in your bank account very differently, not with anxiety, not with confusion, but with something closer to a plan. Let's get into it. The illusion of enough. Here's the first thing I want to address because I think it quietly ruins a lot of people's financial momentum, and it has everything to do with how we mentally frame savings milestones. When you reach $10,000 in savings, there's a very natural psychological response, this feeling of arrival, like, okay, I made it, I did the thing, I can breathe now. And look, that feeling isn't entirely wrong. $10,000 is a meaningful number, but the mistake, and this is the one that trips people up more than almost anything else, is treating that number like a destination instead of a foundation. Think about it this way. Imagine you're building a house. You spend months laying the foundation, digging, pouring concrete, all that unglamorous, invisible work. And the foundation looks done. It's solid, it's level, it's real. But nobody moves into a foundation and calls it a house. The foundation is just what everything else gets built on. $10,000 in savings is your financial foundation. It's not the house. What happens when people treat it like the house is kind of predictable, actually. They stop. They relax. They start spending a little more freely because, hey, there's a cushion now, right? And slowly, not all at once, but gradually, that $10,000 number starts drifting down to 9, then 8. Then they have a car repair and a medical bill in the same month, and suddenly they're back at 6, and then they're grinding all over again, feeling that same exhausting cycle. I'm not describing this to make anyone feel bad. I'm describing it because it's incredibly common, and it happens not because of laziness, but because of a misunderstanding about what savings actually is. Here's the reframe I want you to hold on to. Savings is not a scoreboard. It's not a number you hit and then maintain like some kind of financial trophy. Savings is a tool, and like any tool, its value comes entirely from how you use it. So the very first question to ask when you hit $10,000 isn't, how do I protect this? It's, what is this $10,000 actually for? An emergency fund? Investing base? A down payment? Debt payoff ammunition? All of those are legitimate answers, but you need to have an answer, because without one, that money is just sitting there feeling like a destination, and slowly, quietly, it'll start looking more like spending money than savings. The emergency fund math nobody does. Okay, so let's talk about emergency funds, because this is where I see people get surprisingly confused. The conventional wisdom is that you should have 3 to 6 months of expenses saved in an emergency fund. Great advice. Classic. Totally correct. But here's the part nobody actually walks you through: the math of what that means for $10,000 specifically. Let's say your monthly expenses are around $3,500, which honestly is pretty average for a lot of people depending on where they live. Rent, utilities, groceries, car payment, insurance, subscriptions you keep forgetting to cancel, all of that adds up fast. 3 months of expenses at $3,500 a month is $10,500. 6 months is $21,000. So here's the uncomfortable truth. Depending on your monthly spending, $10,000 might be your entire emergency fund, or it might only be half of one. And this matters a lot because if $10,000 represents your complete emergency fund, meaning if you lost your income tomorrow, that money would be gone in roughly 3 months, then you have no business investing it yet. You haven't even finished building the foundation I was talking about. You're still in phase one. Now, if your expenses are lower, say you're living lean at around $2,000 a month, then $10,000 gives you 5 months of runway, which is solid. That means you've essentially completed your emergency fund, and now you can start thinking about what to actually do with the next dollar you save. I know this sounds like basic math, and it kind of is, but you'd be stunned how many people skip this step entirely. They hit $10,000, they feel good, they decide to start investing because they heard that's what you're supposed to do, and then 3 months later they have a real emergency. Job loss, medical issue, car transmission, whatever, and they have to liquidate investments at the worst possible time, potentially at a loss, and pay taxes on top of it. The emergency fund was supposed to prevent exactly that scenario. So before anything else, do the math. Take your actual monthly expenses, not a rough guess, the real number, and multiply it by 3. Is your $10,000 more or less than that? That one calculation changes everything about what your next move should be. The high-yield savings account conversation that most people avoid. All right, I want to spend a minute on something that seems almost too simple to be worth talking about, but I keep meeting people who aren't doing it, so here we go. If you have $10,000 sitting in a regular savings account at a major bank, and I mean a brick-and-mortar bank, one of the big ones with the TV commercials, you're almost certainly earning somewhere between 0.01% and 0.05% interest on that money per year. On $10,000, that's $1, maybe $5 per year. Meanwhile, high-yield savings accounts, which are FDIC insured, completely safe, just as accessible as a regular savings account, have been offering somewhere in the range of 4 to 5% in recent years. On $10,000, that's $400 to $500 in interest for doing literally nothing differently except where the money lives. I know I'm sounding like I'm pitching something here, but I'm genuinely not. I just find it almost painful that this gap exists and most people don't know about it. It's like finding out that you've been paying $400 more than you needed to for the same exact product for years. That's the feeling. Now, to be fair, interest rates change. They're tied to what the Federal Reserve is doing with monetary policy, and they move up and down over time. But even in lower rate environments, high-yield savings accounts tend to offer meaningfully more than traditional banks. The habit of using them is worth building regardless of the specific rate today. The usual objections I hear are things like, it takes a few days to transfer money out, which is true. Transfers can take 2 to 3 business days. But honestly, for an emergency fund, that's fine. Real financial emergencies almost never require instant access to cash. Medical bills don't come due in 24 hours. Job loss doesn't require you to immediately empty an account. A few days of float is genuinely not a problem. The other objection is it seems complicated to set up. And look, I get it, inertia is real, but most high-yield savings accounts take about 10 minutes to open online. It's one of the highest return-on-effort financial moves available to literally anyone. So if your $10,000 is sitting in a regular savings account right now, moving it is probably the single easiest win available to you. Do it this week. The debt question, and why the math might surprise you. Here's where things get genuinely interesting, and where I think a lot of people make emotionally driven decisions that aren't necessarily in their best financial interest. If you have $10,000 in savings and you also have debt, let's say credit card debt or a personal loan or a car loan, the question of should I invest this money or pay off debt feels like a deeply personal, almost philosophical question. And in some ways it is, but it also has a mathematical answer that most people don't fully think through. The basic framework is this: if your debt is costing you more in interest than your investments are likely to earn, you should prioritize the debt. If your investments are likely to earn more than your debt is costing you, the math favors investing. Credit card debt in the US currently carries an average interest rate of somewhere between 20% and 24%. The stock market historically has returned roughly 7 to 10% annually on average, depending on the index and the time period. So if you're carrying credit card debt, paying it off is almost always the better mathematical move because you are guaranteed a 20+% return by eliminating that interest cost, whereas investing gives you maybe a 7 to 10% probable return with actual risk attached. Personal loans and car loans are trickier because the rates vary so much. If you have a car loan at 5% interest, the math probably doesn't favor paying it off early over investing. If your personal loan is at 15%, it probably does. The point isn't to give you a one-size-fits-all answer. The point is to actually do the math. Compare your debt interest rates against a realistic expected investment return and make a decision based on numbers, not just on the emotional relief of investing, which feels exciting and optimistic, versus the emotional discomfort of paying off debt, which feels punishing and backward-looking. That said, and this is a human note, not a financial one, if you're the kind of person who is genuinely stressed and anxious about debt to the point where it's affecting your life and your well-being, there is real, non-mathematical value in eliminating it. Peace of mind has worth. Just be honest with yourself about why you're making the choice you're making. The investing paralysis and the myth of the perfect moment. Let's say you've done the emergency fund math. You've moved your savings to a high-yield account, you've dealt with high-interest debt, now you're ready to invest. And then you freeze, because the market is at an all-time high and that feels scary, or the market just dropped and that also feels scary for different reasons. Or you don't know whether to pick individual stocks or index funds or ETFs, or whether to open a Roth IRA or a brokerage account or your employer's 401k, and the information available online is so overwhelming and so contradictory and so full of confident people making confident claims that directly conflict with other confident people making other confident claims that you just don't do anything. This is called analysis paralysis, and it is one of the most expensive mistakes in personal finance. Not because any particular decision was wrong, but because no decision is almost always worse than most decisions. Here's a simple truth that took me a while to actually internalize. Time in the market is almost always more valuable than timing the market. What I mean by that is, the longer your money is invested, the more it benefits from compound growth. Every year you wait trying to find the perfect moment to invest is a year of compound growth you're giving up. And those early years matter more than most people realize, because compound growth is exponential. The longer the runway, the more dramatic the acceleration. To put it roughly, $10,000 invested today at a 7% average annual return becomes roughly $20,000 in about 10 years, $40,000 in 20 years, and $80,000 in 30 years, without you adding a single additional dollar. That's the power of starting, even if the timing isn't perfect. Meanwhile, $10,000 sitting in decision paralysis is worth exactly $10,000 plus whatever your savings account pays, which is better than nothing, but nowhere near what it could be. The most common first investing move for someone with $10,000 who is new to investing isn't complicated. Open a Roth IRA if you're eligible. The contribution limit is $7,000 for 2024. Put that money into a broad index fund, something that tracks the total U.S. stock market or the S&P 500. Set it and basically forget it. That's it. That's the thing most finance people will tell you, even after all the complicated analysis. Is it the optimal move for every person in every situation? No, but it's right for a huge percentage of people who are just getting started, and the cost of overthinking and waiting is almost always higher than the cost of making a reasonable decision and starting. The lifestyle inflation trap, the sneakiest wealth killer. Okay, I want to talk about something that I think is honestly the most insidious financial pattern I observe. More damaging than bad investment choices, more damaging than high interest rates, and it's called lifestyle inflation. Here's how it works. You start out with a modest income, modest expenses, and you're grinding to build savings. Then, through hard work, maybe a promotion, maybe a side hustle, maybe just time, your income increases. And almost immediately, almost automatically, your expenses increase too. New apartment, better car, nicer restaurants, more streaming services, better vacations. The individual upgrades all feel justified and reasonable, but collectively they absorb every dollar of the income increase. The result is that you're earning more money than ever before, but you're not building more wealth than ever before. Your savings rate, the percentage of your income that you're actually keeping, stays flat or even shrinks. This is why you see people earning $120,000 a year who feel just as financially stressed as they did when they were earning $60,000. The number went up, but the gap between income and spending never widened. And here's the relevance to $10,000. If you've just hit that milestone, the temptation to treat yourself is real. You've been disciplined, you've been patient, you deserve something, right? And maybe you do. A small, intentional reward for hitting a meaningful goal is actually psychologically healthy. It reinforces the saving behavior. But there's a difference between a deliberate, proportional treat, dinner out, a weekend trip, something you actually planned and chose, and just letting your spending quietly expand because you feel like you can afford it now. One is a celebration, the other is a leak. The antidote is, and this sounds simple but requires real discipline, is to define your savings rate first and let your lifestyle fill in around it. Meaning, before you figure out what you're going to spend, decide what percentage of your income you're going to save, even if it's just 20%, even 15%, and make that automatic. Direct deposit into savings before you ever see the money. What's left is what you can spend. This flips the usual psychology, where people spend first and save whatever's left, which is usually nothing. Treat savings like rent. It's not optional. It goes first. The conversation you need to have with your future self. I want to take a slightly different angle for a minute, because I think there's an emotional dimension to this that pure financial advice doesn't always capture. One of the things I've noticed is that people who consistently build wealth over time have a very specific psychological trait. They genuinely feel connected to their future selves, like they can actually picture the person they'll be in 20 or 30 years, and they feel a kind of loyalty to that person. They make decisions today that are, in a sense, gifts to their future self. People who struggle to build wealth often have the opposite relationship to their future self. That person feels abstract, distant, almost like a stranger. So spending money today on immediate pleasure doesn't feel like taking anything away from anyone real. It just feels like living. This is backed up by some genuinely fascinating psychology research. There are studies that have shown that when people are shown age-progressed photos of themselves, pictures of what they'll actually look like at 65 or 70, they become measurably more willing to save for retirement. Just the act of making the future self feel real and recognizable shifts financial behavior. I'm not suggesting you go find an age progression app, although honestly, maybe do that. What I am suggesting is that you spend a few minutes, genuinely, not as an abstract exercise, thinking about what you want your life to look like at 50, at 60, at 70. What does that person's financial life look like? What choices do they have? What stress are they free from? What experiences are they able to have? And then ask, what does the person I am today need to do to give that future person those options? That's not a math question, that's a values question. And it's one of the most important financial questions you can ask, because it transforms saving from something you're doing out of obligation or fear into something you're doing out of intention and care. When you hit $10,000 in savings, you've already done something your future self is grateful for. The question is just whether you're going to keep going. The automation principle, making wealth building effortless. Here's the last major point I want to make, and might be the most practically actionable one. The reason most people don't consistently save and invest isn't actually lack of discipline. I genuinely believe that. It's lack of systems. Because discipline is a depleting resource. You have a finite amount of willpower in any given day, week, or month. And if you're relying on willpower to make good financial decisions every time the choice comes up, You're going to fail sometimes, guaranteed. The people who build wealth consistently almost universally have this in common. They have automated their financial behavior to the point where the good decisions happen without requiring any active decision at all. What does that look like in practice? It looks like automatic transfers to savings the day after payday. It looks like automatic 401k contributions that you never see in your take-home pay. It looks like automatic investment contributions into a brokerage account on the first of every month. It looks like setting up a bill pay so that your minimum debt payments happen automatically and you're never late. When the good behavior is automatic, the only way to deviate from it is to actively intervene. You have to consciously stop the savings transfer or change the investment amount. And that friction is incredibly powerful because it turns inertia from your enemy into your ally. Right now, inertia probably works against most people. The default is to spend what's in your checking account because it's there and it's easy. But if you set up your finances so that savings and investments happen automatically, the default becomes wealth accumulation, and that's a completely different trajectory. With $10,000 in savings, you have momentum. The question is whether you build systems that maintain and accelerate that momentum, or whether you rely on willpower and good intentions, which are, and I say this with genuine compassion, not reliable enough to base a financial future on. Set up the automation. Make the good choices the default. Let the system work so you don't have to. So, let me bring this all together, because I've covered a lot of ground and I want to make sure the most important ideas land clearly. $10,000 in savings is genuinely meaningful. I don't want anything I said today to diminish that. In a country where the majority of adults say they couldn't cover a $400 emergency from savings, reaching $10,000 puts you in a position most people aren't in. You've done something real. But the mistake that the title of this video is pointing at isn't one dramatic, obvious error. It's a quieter pattern. It's treating that milestone as a destination. It's letting the emotional relief of having money dissolve the discipline it took to build it. It's skipping the math on whether your emergency fund is actually complete. It's leaving money in an account that's earning next to nothing when it could be earning something. It's making debt versus invest decisions based on feelings rather than interest rates. It's waiting for the perfect moment to start investing while time, the most valuable ingredient in compound growth, keeps passing. It's letting your lifestyle expand to absorb every income increase. And it's failing to build systems that make the good financial behavior automatic, so it happens even on the days when you're tired and stressed and your willpower is nowhere to be found. None of these mistakes are shameful. None of them make you bad with money or financially hopeless. They make you human. They make you exactly like most people who were never taught a better way. And that's the whole point of today, really. Not to make you feel bad about what you've done, but to hand you a slightly clearer map for what comes next. Because here's what I genuinely believe. The financial decisions you make in the year or two after hitting your first major savings milestone have an outsized impact on your long-term trajectory. They set patterns. They build or fail to build the habits and systems and psychological frameworks that determine whether that $10,000 becomes $50,000 and then $150,000 and then actual life-changing wealth, or whether it stays $10,000 for the next 5 years, drifting up and down, never quite becoming the foundation it was meant to be. You've done the hard part of getting here. The path forward doesn't actually require more sacrifice or more discipline than what you've already shown. It mostly just requires clarity. Knowing what the money is for, knowing where it should live, knowing when to invest it and when to use it to eliminate debt, knowing how to set up a system that works even when your motivation doesn't. That clarity is available to you. It was always available to you. Sometimes it just needed someone to lay it out slowly, in plain language, without trying to sell you anything. So if you're sitting there right now with $10,000 in a bank account, feeling that weird mixture of pride and anxiety, take a breath. You're not behind. You're not lost. You just need a next step, not a complete overhaul. Pick one thing from today, just one. Whether it's opening a high-yield savings account, or doing the emergency fund math, or setting up an automatic transfer, or finally opening that investment account you've been putting off. Pick one thing and do it this week. Your future self, that person you're going to be in 20 or 30 years, is already grateful for the $10,000. Make sure they're even more grateful for what you did next.